You know, you should just stop pretending there's nothing to play when you're actively ignoring the best games on the market to buy the same recycled $70 trash every year. You aren't a gamer, you're just a consumer feeding a broken industry while masterpieces rot in the bargain bin. It's time to fix your terrible taste and play these games we have here that actually deserves your attention. So, let's dive in. Let's kick off this list with Quantum Break. This is the title that basically tried to fuse a high-budget TV show with a third-person shooter. Imagine playing through a massive action sequence and then sitting back to watch a full live-action episode that changes based on your choices. It is a wild experiment from the folks at Remedy who always push the boundaries of how we tell stories. You follow a guy who gains the power to manipulate time after a science experiment goes horribly wrong at a university. The plot deals with the literal end of time, and the stakes feel incredibly heavy as you watch the world start to stutter and freeze. Movement feels heavy and impactful because you are constantly warping around the battlefield to get the drop on enemies. You can freeze bullets in midair or dash across the room in the blink of an eye to confuse the guards. The visual effects are still some of the best in the business, even years after it first launched. It is a shame more people do not talk about it because the acting from the main cast is top tier. Some players found the transition between the game and the show a bit jarring, but it creates a rhythm you just do not see anywhere else. If you enjoy mind-bending sci-fi that treats its audience like they actually have a brain, this is a mandatory play. It represents a bold risk that the industry rarely takes anymore, making it a true standout for anyone tired of the status quo. Coming in next, we find ourselves crashing onto a dark and hostile alien world in the masterpiece known as Returnal. Returnal follows a space scout who is trapped in a never-ending loop where every death sends her right back to the moment her ship went down. The story is a deep, psychological mystery that unravels through eerie recordings and strange visions found among ancient ruins. Because the environment shifts and changes every time you restart, you never quite know what terrors are waiting behind the next door. The action is incredibly fast and demands your full attention as you dodge hundreds of glowing projectiles filling the screen at once. You must master the art of moving constantly while firing back with strange and powerful tools found throughout the biomes. Each successful encounter feels like a massive victory because the stakes are so high when a single mistake can end a long run. The way the controller vibrates to mimic the sensation of rain or the charge of a weapon adds a layer of immersion that is hard to find elsewhere. It creates a sense of dread and excitement that keeps your heart racing from the first minute to the last. While the difficulty might scare some players away, the feeling of finally overcoming a massive boss is absolutely unmatched. This is a game that respects your time by demanding your best, making it an essential pick for anyone who loves a true challenge. Coming in next, we have Ghostrunner, and honestly, this is what happens when you drink too many energy drinks and decide to become a cyberpunk ninja. It's a first-person slasher set in this grimy, neon-soaked megastructure where you're climbing from the bottom to the top to take out the tyrant running the show. But the plot is really just an excuse to get you moving, because the real star here is the movement itself. You know, it's sort of like a puzzle game disguised as an action game, because everyone, including you, dies in a single hit. That might sound annoying, I mean, dying over and over again usually sucks, but here the respawn is so fast, you're back in the action before you can even get mad. You're wall running, sliding, and dashing through the air in a way that makes other first-person games look like they're moving in slow motion. It's not about hiding or taking cover. It's about pure, unadulterated speed and aggression. The electronic soundtrack is absolutely pounding in your ears, syncing up with your swings to create this flow state that is hard to describe until you feel it. Visually, it punches way above its weight class, delivering that high-fidelity sci-fi look that usually costs a fortune to produce. I'm not saying it's perfect, as the difficulty spikes can definitely make you want to throw your controller across the room. But when you finally nail a room, slicing through 5 guys without your feet ever touching the floor, you feel like a god. It's a short ride, sure, but it respects your time by cutting out all the filler and leaving just the good stuff. If you're tired of bloated open worlds that waste your time, this linear adrenaline shot is exactly what the doctor ordered. Coming in next is Prey, and man, talk about a game that got completely ignored for no good reason. It's a crying shame because this thing is a masterpiece of design that fully trusts you to figure things out on your own. You're stuck on this massive retro-style space station that is just infested with these shadowy aliens that can mimic everyday objects. I mean, you walk into a room, see a coffee cup, and you have to wonder if that cup is going to try and eat your face. It creates this constant state of paranoia that I haven't really felt in a game since the classics of the genre. The cool part is that you can play it however you want, like using this weird glue gun to freeze enemies or build your own stairs to reach high ledges. You can even copy the alien powers and turn yourself into a lemon to roll through small gaps, which sounds ridiculous but is actually key to survival. The station itself feels lived in, full of secrets and little details that paint a picture of what life was like before everything went to hell. It's a slow burn, sure, but the atmosphere is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The story messes with your head in the best way possible, constantly making you question your own memory. If you like games that don't hold your hand and let you break the rules, you need to play this. It's smart, it's scary, and it deserves way more love than it got. Next on the list, usually movie tie-in games are pretty terrible cash grabs, but Mad Max is the exception that proves the rule. It had the bad luck of releasing on the exact same day as the last Metal Gear Solid, so it got totally overshadowed. That is a huge miss for gamers because the car combat here is arguably the best in the genre. You aren't just driving, you're building a war machine from scrap in a world that wants you dead. The wasteland is stunningly rendered, capturing that desolate, rusty vibe perfectly. On foot, the fighting is brutal and crunchy, feeling a lot like a heavier version of the Batman games. But the real magic happens when you're behind the wheel, using a harpoon to rip wheels off enemy vehicles. The explosions are spectacular, with fire effects that still look better than most games coming out today. One of the coolest features is the dynamic weather, where massive sandstorms roll in and force you to find cover immediately. It can get a little repetitive if you're the type who needs to clear every single icon on the map. But the progression of upgrading your car keeps you hooked because you feel the power grow. It's gritty, loud, and incredibly satisfying to play. If you skipped it back in 2015, now is the time to correct that. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. This title practically had zero chance of success because everyone was still angry about the Avengers live service disaster. We all expected another soulless cash grab, but what we got was arguably the best comic book story in gaming since Arkham City. You play exclusively as Star-Lord, which sounds limiting on paper, but it is actually a brilliant design choice. The combat is not just about shooting, it is about commanding your squad to trigger abilities like an RTS game in the middle of an action movie. I mean, the banter is relentless, yet it somehow never gets annoying because the writing is genuinely sharp and funny. These versions of the characters feel distinct from the movies, and in some ways they arguably have more depth than their cinema counterparts. One of the wildest features is the huddle mechanic, where you pause the battle to give a motivational speech to the team. If you choose the right words, a hit song from the 80s starts blasting and your squad goes absolutely berserk. It is stupid, it is cheesy, and it is absolutely perfect for the vibe they are going for. The narrative hits emotional notes that will catch you completely off guard if you are just expecting explosions. It is a tight, linear single-player experience with zero microtransactions, which is a rare breed in 2026. If you ignored this because of the Marvel fatigue, you owe it to yourself to go back and play it. Coming in next, we have Days Gone. So this is another title that was unfairly written off at launch because of technical bugs that are now long gone. You ride into a post-apocalyptic Pacific Northwest that looks stunning but wants to kill you at every turn. The protagonist is a biker named Deacon, and unlike other games, your motorcycle is actually a character itself that needs fuel and care. If you run out of gas in the middle of nowhere, you are in serious trouble. The main threat here is not your typical zombie. They are called freakers, and they are fast, angry, and relentless. The horde mechanic is the real showstopper, putting hundreds of enemies on screen at once who move like a wave of water. Seeing a massive swarm pour over a hill towards you is a level of panic that few games manage to create. You have to use traps, explosives, and the environment just to survive these massive encounters. It is definitely a slow burn, taking a good 10 hours before the story really grabs you by the throat. Some people quit early, but those who stick around find a surprisingly deep story about brotherhood and loss. The world feels dangerous and lonely in a way that sticks with you long after you put the controller down. We might never get a sequel from Sony, which is a tragedy considering how good this game actually is. It is polished, it is massive, and in 2026 it stands as a premier open-world survival experience. Next on the list, we have Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden. This game, I mean, it really flew under the radar because it came out right around the time everyone was losing their minds over Helldivers 2 and Final Fantasy. And to be fair, if you play it just for the combat, you might be disappointed. It's a bit stiff, you know? It feels like a budget God of War clone that doesn't quite have the polish or the weight that you want from an action RPG. But the reason you play this isn't for the fighting, it's for the writing. The story follows two ghost hunters who are lovers, and when one dies, the other is haunted by her ghost. It creates this really intense dynamic where every choice you make actually matters because you're deciding whether to sacrifice the living to bring her back or let her go. The morality system here isn't just binary good and bad, it's genuinely difficult. You run into these hauntings in the freezing North American wilderness, and the cases are tragic, messy, and complicated. You have to judge people, and sometimes there is no right answer. The world is moody and dark, and the banter between the two leads is some of the most natural relationship writing I've heard in years. It's a long game, maybe a little too long for its own good, because there is a lot of backtracking and the enemy variety runs thin pretty fast. But if you can look past the jank, the narrative payoff is absolutely worth the price of admission. It's one of those AA gems that we don't see enough of anymore, and it deserves way more respect for the story it tells. Next up, actually, this is a brand new game, and it's Hell Is Us. This title basically had no chance because it released the exact same day as Hollow Knight Silksong, which was a death sentence for its marketing. And look, it is not a perfect game, it is actually kind of flawed in a lot of ways. As a Souls-like, the combat is not great. I mean, it is serviceable, but it is definitely not the reason you are here. But as an exploration game, it is fantastic and totally unique. The setting is this weird mix of modern-day civil war and ancient cosmic horror that really should not work, but totally does. You are walking through occupied villages with burning government buildings and soldiers committing atrocities, and then 5 minutes later you are in some alien ruin. It does not hold your hand either, refusing to give you map markers or easy waypoints, which forces you to actually learn the layout of the world. It is a mystery game first and an action game second, which is good because the boss fights can be kind of bad sometimes. The lore is fascinating, building this alternate history that goes back to the 90s. It is a game that ends without resolving everything, which might annoy some people. However, the atmosphere is so thick and the puzzle solving is so rewarding that you wind up forgiving the clunky parts. It deserves way more attention than it got, just for being so weirdly beautiful. And up next, we have Children of the Sun. This is a game that is really hard to describe because it looks like a sniper game, but it plays more like a twisted game of pool. You play as a girl waging a one-woman war against a cult, but the catch is you only get a single bullet for each level. I mean, literally one bullet to kill everyone on the map. You fire the shot, and the moment it hits an enemy, time freezes, and you get to re-aim that same bullet to the next target. It becomes this spatial puzzle where you have to figure out the perfect path to chain all your kills together in one go. The visual style is incredibly distinctive, looking like a neon-soaked, grimy fever dream that feels uncomfortable to look at in the best way. It is a very short experience, you know, you can probably finish the whole thing in about 3 or 4 hours. That might turn some people off who want a 100-hour RPG, but honestly, the game does not overstay its welcome. It is repetitive by design, yet figuring out the solution to a complex layout feels so rewarding that you do not care. The story is minimal but efficient, told through these wordless, jagged cutscenes that fit the vibe perfectly. There is a leaderboard system too that makes you want to replay levels just to shave off a few milliseconds or find a crazier path. It is weird, it is violent, and it is one of the most creative mechanics I have seen in a long time. If you want a quick hit of adrenaline that forces you to think, you need to check this out. Coming up next, we have Lost Judgement. It's the sequel to the first detective spin-off, and it really lives in the shadow of the main Like a Dragon games, which is a shame because the combat here is arguably the peak of the entire engine. It's fast, it's fluid, and swapping between the 3 fighting styles makes you feel like a martial arts master. It's definitely flawed in some areas, like the stealth sections, which are just kind of basic and boring. And the tailing missions? Yeah, they are still here and they are still annoying. But the narrative is this super heavy, intense look at bullying and the legal system that goes to some really dark places. Then, completely contrasting that, you have the School Stories, which is this massive side campaign where you go undercover at a high school. You're managing a dance club, building robots and boxing students, and it's just so much content that it feels like a whole separate game. It's weird, because the tone shifts from depressing crime drama to high school antics, but it somehow keeps you hooked. The skateboarding is a nice addition too, letting you cruise around Yokohama without just running everywhere. It's a huge package, maybe too big for completionists who get overwhelmed easily. The detective mechanics aren't as deep as they should be, I'll be real about that, but as an action game with a story that actually has something to say, it's top tier. It deserves way more credit for refining the formula while the main series went turn-based. From there, we have X-Men Origins Wolverine, and this is the classic example of the game being infinitely better than the movie it was based on. I mean, the movie was a total disaster, we all know that, but the game? It's arguably the best Wolverine simulator ever made, even better than some of the dedicated X-Men titles. It's a straight-up hack and slash that clearly ripped off God of War, but it fits the character so perfectly that you don't even care. It's incredibly violent, like, you're literally tearing robots apart and lunge-attacking helicopters in midair. The regeneration mechanic is visually wild because you can see his skin get stripped away to the adamantium skeleton and then watch it grow back in real time. It's gross, sure, but it really sells the fantasy of being unkillable. The story is a bit of a mess, basically ignoring the movie when it feels like it to throw in Sentinels and other comic book villains. It's definitely repetitive, you know? You are doing the same claw attacks for 8 hours straight, and the platforming sections are kind of clunky and frustrating by modern standards. But the combat just has this visceral weight to it that makes every hit feel satisfying. It was delisted from digital stores years ago due to licensing, which makes it really hard to play now unless you have a disc. That scarcity kind of adds to its legend, but it's a shame because more people should experience it. It's mindless, bloody fun that understands the character better than Hollywood did at the time. If you can track down a copy, it is absolutely worth the effort just to let loose. Sliding in next is Kill Knight, and this is pure, unfiltered arcade aggression. It is an isometric shooter that looks like it was dipped in a bucket of blood and pure darkness. You play as this betrayed knight who has been thrown into the abyss, and your only goal is to slaughter everything in your path to get out. It is incredibly fast. I mean, the pace is so frantic that if you blink, you are probably going to die. The visual style is striking, using this high-contrast red and black palette that makes the action readable even when the screen is full of enemies. It feels a lot like Doom Eternal, but from a top-down perspective, because it forces you to manage your resources constantly. You have to kill enemies to get health, and you have to perform specific kills to get ammo, so you can never just camp in a corner. It is definitely not for everyone, because the difficulty curve is basically a vertical wall right from the tutorial. You are going to die a lot, and for some people, that repetition might get frustrating pretty quickly. It is a game that demands perfection, forcing you to enter a flow state where you are reacting on pure instinct. The controls are tight and responsive, which is good because any mistake is definitely your fault and not the game being unfair. There is not much of a story here, you know, it is really just an excuse to string together arenas of chaos. But the feedback loop of destroying a room full of demons is so satisfying that you do not really care about the plot. It is a short experience if you are just trying to beat it, but the real game is chasing high scores on the leaderboards. It strips away all the modern bloat of open worlds and cutscenes to deliver raw gameplay. If you miss the days when games were just about mastering mechanics, this is a must-play title. It is intense, it is brutal, and it is easily one of the best action games of the last few years. Taking the next slot is Ultra Age. People like to call this game Discount Nier Automata, and honestly, they are not entirely wrong about that. It is a low-budget character action game that wears its influences proudly on its sleeve. You play as a guy named Age who has 7 days left to live, fighting through a post-apocalyptic world to find a cure. The story is pretty standard anime sci-fi stuff, you know, nothing you have not seen a dozen times before. And let us be real, the English voice acting is absolutely atrocious. I mean, it is so bad that you will probably want to switch the language to Japanese within the first 5 minutes. But the combat is where this thing absolutely shines. It focuses on this blade switching mechanic where you swap weapons mid-combo to break different types of armor. It feels incredibly fast and snappy, almost as good as the giants of the genre like Devil May Cry. You have a wire hook that lets you zip towards enemies, keeping the aggression high so the action never stops. The graphics are surprisingly sharp for an indie title powered by Unreal Engine, even if the levels are a bit linear. It is definitely a short ride, which might disappoint people looking for a 50-hour epic. However, it does not waste your time with filler content or boring fetch quests. It knows exactly what it is, which is a tight, focused action game made by a small team with a lot of passion. If you can look past the budget limitations, it delivers a combat loop that is genuinely addictive. Earning this spot is Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. You know, people always talk about expansion packs, but this stands alone as arguably the most fun 5 hours you can have in a video game. It is a total parody of every 80s action movie you watched on VHS tape growing up. You play as a cyber commando named Rex Power Colt, and yes, that is his actual name. The world is drenched in this neon purple and red fog that looks like a laser tag arena exploded. It takes the solid shooting from the main game and just removes all the boring crafting stuff so you can focus on blowing things up. I mean, there is literally a button dedicated to just giving the middle finger to your enemies. It is absolutely ridiculous, but that is exactly why it works so well. The writing is hilarious, constantly making fun of the tutorials and the tropes of the genre. It is not deep, let us be honest. It is just dumb fun with dragons that shoot lasers from their eyes. The synthwave soundtrack is incredible, pumping this electronic beat that makes you feel like an action hero. Some people might find the visual filter a bit too intense after a while, but it represents a time when games were not afraid to just be silly and cool. It is the perfect palate cleanser after playing all these serious 100-hour epics. If you want to smile from start to finish, this is the one you must play.